My name is Tim Buckley. I'm a 24-year-old gamer. I've played every violent game in existence, and I have never
unalive
anyone. There are millions of gamers just like me, and we're getting sick of people like you blaming your problems on us. Ignorance causes violence, not video games. Man up and take responsibility. We outnumber you, and the people that think like you don't with us.
He just said that they're non-violent, and then proceeded to say we outnumber you and you shouldn't with us. Oh boy. This is gonna be quite the read. What's going on, guys? It's your boy, the Prince of All Saiyans, back again with another comic review. So, Ctrl+Alt+Delete is not just a keyboard shortcut to get to your security options. It's also a webcomic that's been running since 2002. That is 22 years, and it's still ongoing. Wild. Anyway, this comic is notorious for one particular episode called Loss that's become a meme. And, yeah, the comic itself has a little bit of infamy around it. Of course, there was that one little bit I showed you at the beginning. So, I wanted to take a look at this comic, really find out the origins of this Loss meme, and, see if this comic's any good. Some people say it's bad, some people actually like it. Looking at the website, there are comments that say they actually enjoy it. Some people think it's terrible, some people think it's great. I don't know, let's check it out. There's also an animated series, which most people say is horrendous, which I will be taking a look at, depending how long this video goes. Might be split up into two parts, considering we got 22 years of a comic to get through. Without any further preamble, let's get right into the review. Okay, to start it off, we got two guys that sit around and play video games all day, which was not uncommon for a webcomic in the early 2000s. There's a running gag for the first few strips that they're trying to add a third character to make it unique. I blew a bit of air out my nose for the first one, that's about it. I do appreciate the one extra panel here. Some people have said it's unnecessary, however, I think it adds a bit of comedic timing. Anyway, we have a few running jokes in the beginning, one about dial-up, it was 2002, and one about stray arrows, which might be referencing something dated, which is an immediate problem I note with this comic. On one hand, I understand that this comic has been running for 22 years, but adding current-day humor into your comic will instantly date it. I believe I mentioned pop culture references falling flat in my Lightbringer review. Not everyone has consumed every piece of media you have, so it's best to avoid that kind of thing. However, I'm not sure if Buckley intended for this comic to go as long as it has. At one point he adds shading, so good on you, pal. So eventually we get to the first actual bit of continuity, and that's Ethan's toxic girlfriend. Side note, you may have realized by now, but Ethan is kind of an asshole. Well, his name is Ethan. Alright, jokes aside about people named Ethan, this kind of a-hole protagonist might actually work out in a comedy. Always Sunny comes to mind. But I know this evolves from a comedy to something else, so hopefully we don't reach that turning point for a while. Oh, and there was this one comic right here. Look, man, I'm not like super PC woke or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, I love dark, edgy humor and all that, but I don't know, man. I will say this was 2002, and, a certain event happened the year prior, and, it was a different time, Yeah, but we're going to move on from that one. There's also poorly photoshopped pictures in this comic, like at the very least, run it through a posterized filter or something, Anyway, the art will get its own segment, as will be the case for all comic reviews. The story is the first thing I want to cover. So Ethan's girlfriend with the weird anatomy and toxic personality gives him an ultimatum between her and his video games. By the way, if anyone gives you an ultimatum like this, it's probably best to cut them off. Addiction's one thing, sure, but let your partner have hobbies, Sorry to give dating advice here. I guess don't listen to it because I'm single. I wonder why. Anyway, at this point, I realized that maybe the comic wasn't so bad. There were even some nice comments under it. I would, however, recommend reading it on a tablet if you want to read it yourself, where the egregious amount of ads are tucked away a bit nicer. The desktop version is a nightmare. Luckily, these comics have dates, so I'll divide these by year. Not so luckily, there are 22 years worth of it. So, anyway, Ethan becomes an alcoholic and his roommate is finally named. The other guy is named Lucas. Weirdly enough, within a few pages after naming Lucas, a new roommate called Scott joins the cast. But I'm already getting ahead of myself. So there's this one-off comic that depicts Mac users as bumbling white Southerners. While I personally despise Macs as well, I think these kinds of depictions of white Southerners are not cool. They've been frequently misrepresented in the media, and while this was a different time in 2002, I can't help but note this fact. The majority of white Southerners are not like this, and this Sweet Home Alabama-fication of them is not cool, bro. But whatever. Moving along. One comic that did get a mild chuckle out of me was the one of the Best Buy employees forcing a protection plan on Ethan for a pack of batteries. That shit is annoying. Anyway, Ethan really hates the new roommate Scott and is a massive a-hole about it, as one would expect. Also, it seems that Tim Buckley likes to use violence as a punchline in a lot of his one-offs. I don't know, it depends on context, but usually I don't think that's all that comedic. So Scott has a pet penguin because he uses Linux, and now to be honest, I'm starting to side with Ethan on his hate for Scott. Anyway, Ethan gets drunk and allegedly eats the penguin in the soup. Turns out he didn't, but insinuates he wouldn't care if he did. Well, I'm back to hating Ethan. That's not cool, bro. Anyway, Ethan tries to overclock his computer in a shocking 6-panel comic. Wow, that's the rare instance of it being better off remaining as 4 panels. This breaks his computer and puts him in a catatonic state because it's implied he might have a video game addiction. So Scott and Lucas need to fix his computer to get him to snap back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity. And that's where 2002 ends. The initial impressions were that it wasn't as bad as I expected and even got a bit of nose air out of me. Nose air, not nose hair, in a handful of these strips. I find Ethan a very unsympathetic and unlikable protagonist, but as stated previously, this can work in a comedy. The problem is that he's sort of painted as the righteous party in a lot of these strips, even though he's a piece of shit. Now, the comic does continue, and I know it strays from comedy, so here's hoping for a bit of character development. Although, looking at a picture of Tim Buckley himself, he's got a very similar Dawson's Creek-ass haircut, so this might actually be a case of a self-insert. Who knows? Let's hope not. Moving on to 2003. Okay, so Scott and Lucas fix Ethan's computer, and he's back to being an insufferable doucher as always. There's a new character introduced in this segment named Lila. I haven't seen Lost many times, I already know where this is going. Ethan is flabbergasted at the existence of a girl that plays video games. Well, I mean it was 2003. So he decides to grab her breasts. Wow, what an asshole. Speaking of asshole things, Ethan also had everything that reminded him of his ex thrown out, including Lucas's mattress. He explained to Lucas, shamelessly, that they had sex on his bed, and Lucas had a pretty standard reaction. Should also note that Lucas isn't quite the friendly guy himself and is almost as much of an asshole as Ethan. Almost. Scott tries to use Ethan's computer, and apparently there's a device built in designed to strangle Linux users or something. I don't know. There's this one comic that I don't understand. Like, what is this? There's this one comic that actually got a laugh out of me. Oh, and Ethan punches the Lucky Charms leprechaun. There's a story arc about the heat being broken in the apartment building, and Ethan creates the fictional holiday of Winter Eamus. I believe this is relevant for later, but I've only seen a few strips of this comic before actually reading it. Anyway, as for the main plot, Ethan and Lila become friends, and because she beats him in Soul Calibur, he falls in love with her because cringe mid-2000s gamer humor. Anyway, he tries to get her a Valentine's Day gift and ends up giving her a bouquet made out of ram sticks. And he immediately requests to touch her boobs. I really do not like this guy. Somehow he's getting progressively worse. It was at this point I realized I still had 20 and a half years of strips to go through. This video might be split up into parts. I'll admit that this comic is actually not as bad as I first expected, but the biggest problem is how unlikable the cast is. My favorite characters so far are Scott and Ted the Penguin. Scott actually seems like the most normal human being out of all of them. Lila has yet to have enough screen time. Ethan and Lucas are scum of the earth. But once again, here's hoping for some character development. So at a certain point, it's revealed that the best character in this comic, Scott, was actually paying the entire rent. So there's also a running gag about Lila that's essentially, oh my god, a gamer girl? Which, I mean, it was 2003, but come on. Ethan continues to be a scumbag, kidnaps a game store employee, and threatens to unalive him with Lucas, who's also an asshole at this point, almost like he's having a reverse character arc. But Lucas is decent enough to go get a job and make Ethan get one too, so Scott doesn't have to pay the entire rent. Ethan just walks to random places and gets jobs, which is so not how it works now. He ends up working in a video game store because, of course. Also, somehow Lila actually likes Ethan, which is a bigger ass pull than a full rectal prolapse. Don't know what that is? Do not look it up. There's a Fallout 2 level editor out there. Wow, Fallout 2. This comic certainly is 22 years old. Anyway, Ethan has a Fallout addiction because he likes shitty Bethesda games. Yeah, I said it. I will also say you should see my playtime in Oblivion and Skyrim, but that's besides the point. So he hears about it and goes missing. For some reason, Lila and Lucas want to find him. If I were them, I'd change the locks, but they do find him in a crack house for video game addicts, and apparently it was built for EverQuest addicts. One of said EverQuest addicts cracks Ethan on the head with a cinder block for standing too close to his modem, and the Fallout addiction arc ends. He then successfully asks Lila out. How? I don't know. This guy's an actual piece of shit. And the fact that Lila seems like one of the more rational people in this comic only makes this more unbelievable. My disbelief is no longer suspended. Anyway, they have plans, but Lucas got him and Ethan tickets to E3. Remember E3? So now he's torn, and I want to put this comic down. There were a handful of jokes in it that did get a chuckle from me. You know, just a little haha. Just a little, you know, a little, you know, one of those, little haha. Alright, like that. Overall, these characters suck. You can write unlikable characters, sure, but that's usually reserved either for an antagonist or someone whose character arc is involved in them changing over time. These guys are all just douchebags, except for Scott. We like Scott here. But I will soldier on to at least the first appearance of Lost for this video. Alright, I'm getting sick of these assholes. Let's take a look at the animated series. So if you didn't know, ctrl+alt+del actually got a web series of animated shorts made that were actually cost money. Can you believe it? You gotta like pay for a subscription to watch it. Wild. And yeah, let's just check it out. You know, it's on YouTube. Let's just watch the first episode, and I guess I'll just show you guys my complete reaction.
Excuse me, will my PS2 play Xbox games? Excuse me, I need to know if Halo will play on my PS2?
I'm sorry, I don't speak stupid, and our translator called out sick today.
Wait, what are you—
Surely they must have video game stores in the great land of Stupidia, where you'd be able to purchase and be ignorant of all manner of games in accordance with your society's customs.
Okay, I want to speak with your manager.
I do not understand your strange language, and I can only interpret your raised voice and display of teeth as a sign of aggression.
I'm never shopping here again!
Be wary of traffic and open elevator shafts. They're magnets to your kind.
Screw you, pal!
So, first things first. Hello 240p, it's been a while. Secondly, the animation in it is pretty rough, even for mid-2000s Flash standards. The characters are all assholes as usual. I'm still left wondering why Lila likes Ethan. Lucas is a shithead as well. Scott makes a brief appearance in the intro, but he's not in this episode. I mean, I guess that's why he's my favorite character, because he's barely in it, so, you know, he's not as much of an asshole as all the other ones just because he has less screen time. And there's an Xbox robot for some reason. I'm just guessing that I'm behind on the manga for this anime. Anyway, it's an excruciating 5 minutes without any funny jokes and just awful people being awful, but I've seen worse content. I mean, have you guys seen those Go Anime Caillou punishment things that people make? Like, what is that? But, you know. Not quite as bad as that, but still pretty damn bad. Yeah, not feeling this. 2 out of 10. There was some effort, but it's just kind of not good. I really can't believe they actually charged people to watch this. I guess I'll intersperse some micro reviews for the animated series as we progress. Anyway, back to the source material. So, Ethan has a moral dilemma between going on a date with Lila and going to E3. And he actually chooses her over video games. Holy character development, Batman. Unfortunately, his character regresses back to a professional piece of shit. Lila, being tolerable of Ethan's antics, finds out he missed E3 and says she would have understood, and Ethan is unable to comprehend this. Anyway, he upgrades his computer with specs that are laughable today, but were unheard of in 2003 because of a Half-Life 2 trailer. Little did he know that would be the last mainline entry in that franchise. Man, this comic's old. The running gag about Lila being OMG gamer girl keeps coming back. Lucas is an asshole in competition for biggest piece of garbage in this comic with Ethan. There's some development in the romance between Lila and Ethan. There's a joke about rap fans that include an appearance by Best Boy Scott. Let's see, there's a new hire named Rob at Ethan's job who Ethan hates because he's just like him. Well, at least there's a little self-awareness. It seems that Buckley really hated Counter-Strike players at this time. For what reason, I don't know. There's a story arc about Ethan putting his video games in the shower so he doesn't lose precious gaming time to hygiene. Also, at a certain point, Lila asks him if he watches pornography, which he basically admits to. And at this point, I'm realizing that Ethan basically has the personality traits of a modern-day incel. And I use the term incel in the true sense, not the extremist feminist male I disagree with way, you know, in the real true cell way, more or less. He's a raging narcissist who thinks he's morally superior while being the most immoral person in the room. He thinks the world owes him something. He's a scumbag to every person he knows, even those he calls his friends, and he treats women with masculine, quote-unquote, hobbies like mythical beasts. He's an unbearable, unsympathetic, crude, greedy piece of shit, and I can't take it anymore. But we're gonna keep going, at least to loss. So, I decided to give another swing at the animated series, and yeah, it's still shit. It's just shit. The characters are just as unbearable as they are in the comics, so at least it's true to the source material. The animation is still rough, but I mean, what do you expect from a mid-2000s Flash animation? The problem is that this was paid for. You had to pay to watch this. Madness. Anyway, I watched a little bit of one where Ethan lies his way out of work to play video games with the Xbox robot.
Hello?
Hey, Ethan, it's Barry.
Shit, sí, no habla inglés. ¿Por qué?
And there's the other one where he breaks Lucas's drill and demands that he fixes it, even though Ethan was the one to break it.
Ah, damn! Fix.
My drill. Ethan, what the hell, man?
Stop, just stop.
Wow, what an asshole. I can't stand these characters. They're all shit. Except for Scott. We like Scott. Oh, and Ted the Penguin. He's cool too. Anyway, let's get back to the manga, I guess. For as long as I can tolerate, I suppose. Yeah, we're not getting to loss. Okay, so Ethan goes to the beach with Lucas and gets a sunburn, and Buckley does this neat episode with a slightly different art style. I kind of like it, but he goes right back to the standard, I guess you could say, style of this comic. Anyway, Ethan is back to his shenanigans and tries to put his GameCube and Xbox into one super system and ends up burning the couch. There's a story arc about them getting recliners, and Scott actually gets more screen time. Scott, proving once again he's the best character, beats Ethan in video games and puts him in his place, like the little bitch he is. Okay, that's not part of the script, but I don't like Ethan, in case you haven't noticed yet. He also teaches Ethan about meditation. Ethan learns this art and, as expected, is a douche about it. There's also this one panel where he knocks a kid over for literally no reason. It's not funny, it's just making me hate this guy even more. Scott, being the best character, rationalizes Ethan's delusions, and for a moment Ethan isn't obsessed with the powers of meditation or whatever this story is. And then Scott is off screen and no good characters are in the comic anymore. There's this one trip where Ethan demands a wheelchair lift be installed in their stairwell because he's a lazy, entitled gamer, and I just can't take it anymore. Look, man, there are really rare cases of asshole protagonists working like the aforementioned Always Sunny, but this just ain't it, Chief. Doesn't help that the majority of the supporting cast are scumbags too. Best boy Scott is off-screen way too much. And where's Ted the Penguin? I love that guy. There's quite a few instances of walls of text too. I just want it to end, man. Please, no more. I'm gonna bookmark it here for now. Alright, so since this is primarily an art channel, let's talk about the art. The beginning story arcs are all rudimentary and cartoonish. It's not horrible, it's just kind of bland. However, since I tapped out before the later and newest episodes, I want to talk about them just looking at some random pages. There is actually a significant spike in the quality of the art. Buckley actually really improved his craft, and I gotta give him props for that. There's even dynamic lighting, panel variation, and even some camera movement. However, it seems he falls victim to the wall of text again and again. Now, like I said in the Lightbringer review, sometimes you might need to add more words, but do your best to cut them down and use this visual storytelling medium to tell the story through visuals. Now, I'm just looking at these and not reading them, so it may or may not be necessary. I just have to give credit where it's due. The comics quality in terms of art got progressively better and it was noticeable. But drawing comics for 22 years straight will do that. And yeah, we gotta give respect for this guy for sticking to it for so long. Anatomy, perspective, lighting, it all got better and better as it went along, and I always like to see that. The biggest problem I have with the chunk of the comic I read is the characters. The actual plot lines aren't so bad, it's just that everyone is such an asshole I can't care about any of them. And from what I've read, there's minimal character development. Anyway, that was the first chunk of the comic Ctrl+Alt+Delete. If you want me to do a part 2 of this, let's get this video to at least 300 likes. Yeah, let's go for 300. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.